Well, that's new.
That's new. That's never happened before. All right. Thank
Surprise.
you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Uncorked Corner podcast. I'm Nick. I'm here as always with my co-host Bianca, and today we're excited to welcome Matt from Sap House Meadery in Ossipee, New Hampshire. Matt, let's start by having you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your background in making the mead and how the brewery got started, or meadery, I should say. Yep.
Yeah. Well, first off, obviously, thank you for having me on and trying some meads and stuff. It's a pleasure to get to do this and talk to folks that are into mead. So, yeah, I mean, I started Sap House Meadery back in 2009, end of 2009, with my cousin Ash. We were homebrewers, kind of typical story. Wanted to do something in Ossipee, which is our hometown. We kind of grew up there, and had kind of seen the trend of breweries and restaurants and places like that to help to revitalize neighborhoods, beat up downtowns, things like that. And Ossipee is kind of a typical, sort of like New England mill town that just probably 100 years ago was great, but certainly wasn't at the time. Lots of cool buildings and history, but really not a lot going on. So, we'd kind of bounced around the idea. I'd made some beer and some cider. He'd made a ton of mead, and we kind of started thinking about, well, could we do both? But eventually settled on mead just because it sounds kind of dumb now, but at the time we thought there were too many breweries. Which was obviously very wrong, but I'm very happy that we went with mead because it's kind of a niche. It lets us definitely stand out, do something a little bit different, and kind of like make things up as we go. Everybody's us and our colleagues in the industry, we're all kind of just blazing the trail, I guess, for what is mead and what it can be. So that's always been really fun. And, as far as Ossipee goes, I'd like to think that we've had a positive dent on, bringing it back, getting people into town that, maybe otherwise wouldn't be there, and, filling up some of those old buildings with some interesting stuff. So
I think it definitely helped for me because I am actually always driving through that area, right on Route 25, all the way through from Portland into the Lake Winnipesaukee area. So I'm always passing through, but I'd never strayed off that main road and kind of the area that you're in there with. And there's restaurants and everything. And it was a nice little area. And I was excited. And I loved stopping in and seeing your actual tasting room, meadery location. It was beautiful in there. And it was a very, very nice space and somewhere that I'm definitely going to be stopping in a lot more often on my way through there. So let's talk a little bit about that, what you guys have to offer in your tasting room. I know it looked like you might have had tacos up on the chalkboard when I was there last week when I picked up the samples, but tell us about what people can experience if they come visit you in person.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a full restaurant essentially. It's a smaller spot. It's kind of tucked away. The building that we're in is about 125 years old. So it's it's not exactly purpose built for mead manufacturing, but it works pretty well as a little tasting room and pub. We've got, we got flights of all the meads. We do mead cocktails. We've got beer, obviously local craft beers. We've even got some wine if somebody's desperate. We even have some hard seltzer if somebody's really, really desperate. And we've got some like old time regulars. They don't really like mead, but they live around the corner and they like the atmosphere. So I like kind of on the down low, I've always got a 6-pack of Miller High Life like tucked under in one of the drawers in the fridge for those guys. But as far as food goes, yeah, we've got the tacos. It's a pretty eclectic menu. We've got tacos, we've got curries. People love to come in and do like a little bit of a pre-dinner, cheese boards and drinks, that kind of thing. We do a lot of desserts, stuff like that. Burgers, we're even playing around with maybe doing some pizza this year. So we kind of just make whatever pops into our head. Honestly, one of the most popular things that we do, is an oyster night on Friday nights. I go down to the seacoast and grab, some fresh oysters, and we do, buck a shuck kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that would definitely be something I'll be stopping in for. Bianca and I both love that. But
we do.
Yeah, that would be a really good thing, if you're talking kind of, pre-dinner food and drink, something that you can grab and, you can throw back a bunch of oysters and some mead before you head out to do, a bigger dinner, because it's not going to, I guess, get in the way too much, but it'll be nice. And it's definitely an awesome place. So if you're in the New England area, definitely stop by there. And one thing that you just mentioned too, that I don't think we've really talked about much at all. We've sampled a fair bit of mead here on this podcast, but we haven't really talked mead cocktails. So tell us about some of your favorite mead cocktails, which meads that you offer here that, you put into them. If any of the ones that we have here are put into any of the cocktails, so we can try them out for ourselves. That would be a lot of fun. Let's hear about that.
Yeah. So the mead cocktails is definitely something that we're pretty big into. It was actually doing a cocktail was kind of the impetus for starting the pub side of things. So the place that you were in didn't really look like that until about 2015, 2016. Before that, it was just a tasting room, pretty basic setup. You could just sample the meads, and we would do the tasting, let somebody try everything, and then obviously we just kind of talk and hang out. And we could always sense that people wanted more. They'd be standing there at the bar, they'd have sampled everything, and they just want more out of the experience. So we weren't, with New Hampshire law, we weren't allowed to sell glasses of mead at the time, or sell cocktails or anything like that. We could give you free samples, and we could charge for a tasting. What we decided to do to kind of like test the idea out was we set up this little cooler behind the bar, and we could sell somebody a 2-ounce sample. So we would sell them a 2-ounce sample, and then we would give them, some mixers, some ice and some mixers, and, just happen to be in the same glass. And so, we're selling these little $4 or $5 mini cocktails as a way to give people an excuse to kind of hang out and shoot the shit with us for a little bit. And it was just, it was kind of just a way to sort of see what that would be like. But what we learned was that people were really into the idea of mixing mead cocktails and incorporating it. So we started talking to some of the restaurants that we worked with in terms of selling our mead wholesale. Started talking to some of the bartenders and trying to get some ideas. We've done some cocktail recipe contests. We in fact, we just finished one up maybe last week or the week before, with the fans could just submit cocktails. But what we've really found is that, you can do just about anything with mead in terms of flavor profiles, because you can add just about anything to it. And so it ends up that mead is just as versatile as a mixer as any spirit, really. You've got anything for spirits, anything for cordials, whatever, kind of the same thing with mead. I'm trying to think the ones that you've got. I know you mentioned that you've got the one of these days, which is a bourbon barrel aged mead. So that one, obviously lends itself to kind of an old fashioned style drink that we do. It's the bourbon barrel mead, big cube of ice, these particular black bitters that we've got, little muddled orange peel, and that makes for a great little cocktail there. The raspberry jam sesh, obviously good session mead, great in the summertime, super refreshing.
The old fashioned style cocktail. So you mentioned you had the black bitters. So is that the black walnut bitters? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I think so. I know it's got black walnut, but it's got a bunch of other things in it too. It's got black pepper, black walnut. It's got cardamom in it. It's just, the label just says black bitters. And it's got this just really interesting note to it. It's obviously with the walnut, it kind of reminds me a little bit of I don't know, an amaretto kind of thing, but then you've got the spice in there too. So that's a really interesting, addition to getting something a little bit more sharp in there. Meads tend to be kind of fruity, kind of sweet. Getting something kind of savory, kind of sharp in there, always helps to balance it out. Same thing with the citrus, muddling up a little bit of an orange peel, has a good effect. I think the piece that I just mentioned earlier about the raspberry jam sesh, obviously by itself, it's a great summer drink, being a just a good session mead. But in the summertime, when we've got it on draft, we'll make like essentially like, a mojito out of it, and we'll just take some mint, some lime, muddle it up, throw some ice in the glass, and then fill it with the raspberry jam sesh. So mint raspberry, just great sitting out on the patio kind of thing. So they kind of run the gamut from like just making something that's really easy to drink, in the hot weather, kind of like a porch cocktail, to doing something, that's a little bit more complex and layered, like, picking out different kind of bitters and things like that.
I think my favorite part about mead, especially I just took a sip of the raspberry jam sesh because I'm impatient and wanted to try it. But I think my favorite part about mead is how good it just smells and like all the fruity flavors. And I think it's so different than like beer and wine. And obviously like they have their own tasting profiles as well, but I just love like the flavor mixes and the fruit mixes that are in meads. And raspberry is my absolute favorite. So I'm excited to talk about that one, but that sounds incredible. I love mojitos, and I think that's something that I would really enjoy if I was making it for myself.
Yeah, I agree. I
Yeah.
find that a lot with some of the meads that we've tried too. If you have, like a traditional classic mead, it does follow, to me, to my palate, more in the lines of a spirit than like a wine or a beer that you're gonna drink straight. Like I can definitely see with the texture and the power, and they're typically very flavorful, and it's not, you're not getting very subtle notes. It usually hits you in the face with whatever's in it. So I can see that going into a cocktail, definitely being a great base spirit, if you will, for a traditional cocktail as well. And the draft meads that you have here, talking about that, more like a porch cocktail style, also I think is a great idea because it just makes it a bit more drinkable for those hot days. So yeah, I am excited to try those as well. So if you want, we can start with those, Bianca, since you already took a sip. I'll crack my jam sesh open as well, because I haven't tried either of these yet. So I'm excited. So Bianca, while I take it, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you experienced?
So I have 3 here, and I didn't list them off before. So Nick and I have split them up as usual. I have the raspberry jam sesh, which we can talk about first, and then I have, this bottle is amazing. I love the bee on it, so cute. The Bramble. So I don't know if I've had a blackberry maple flavor before, so that will be a fun one to try. I have not tried those yet, I promise. But we can start with the raspberry jam session. I can just talk about my experience with it, and then you can tell us about that in detail. I know you did kind of cover it a little bit, but it's so refreshing. It's truly a great summer, like just pop the can open and enjoy it outside. Like it's so good. And as I said, raspberry is like, it's my thing. Raspberry is my jam. We'll go with that. But it's really, really good. And I did get a chance to try the blueberry as well, which my fiance ran off with because he likes blueberry. And that was also very tasty. So I think these are both really, really good, great for the summer. And I just love how like bright and fruity the flavors are for this time of year.
Yeah. I mean, that is, raspberry is just such a good flavor. I think we just find every excuse to put it into something that we can drink that we can. We make, like a still raspberry. We've made the raspberry jam sesh. One of my favorites that we've got going right now is a raspberry with hibiscus and rose hips. So yeah, I mean, we're just raspberry everywhere. Oh, there you go.
I have that too. Nick, did you plan this?
No, I didn't. Perfect timing though. But yeah, I just took my first sip of it as well. And I'm totally with you. And I think what this would really fill kind of a need for is something that has that fruit, that has that sipability, that isn't just a sugar bomb like a lot of the stuff that's out in the market for that now. Because you're not always going to be in the mood to sip, a regular mead if it's a really hot day. I think we got like 90 degrees coming up in the next couple, and I'm probably not going to be sitting outside drinking a traditional mead on those days. You're going to want something refreshing, but you might not want a beer. Some people don't like beer, and I know for me, I don't like seltzer, so I don't really have that refreshing fruity drink that I would want to have kind of out in the summer on the porch without making sort of a porch style cocktail. But something like this is definitely something that I can see myself gravitating towards because it's not overly carbonated. You don't get that, but you still get that fruitiness. And it is from a, I guess, a texture and a mouthfeel perspective, more along the lines of like maybe like a lager style beer, where it's not too heavy. It goes down easy and you're just getting those nice flavors really on the back end too, especially. But definitely something that I could see myself drinking during the summer on a really hot day.
Yeah, right on. I agree.
Nick, you have the blueberry as well. So do you want to start us
do.
off with that one?
Yeah, I'll crack this one now. Also, I love the can on this, the blueberry one. It's sort of classic, almost, I guess, garage text. I don't even know what you want to call it. It's almost, man, I don't even know. Americani. Very cool can. Yeah.
That's, I mean, you nailed it. It's the reason that it's called wrench turner and that it looks like that is because the production building is, it was an old garage back in like the 30s and the 40s. So you nailed it.
Very cool. That is delicious. Yeah, that is awesome. I like this a lot more than, I'm not as big into fruity stuff overall. I'm more into like beers and whiskeys and things like that. But last time I tried anything that was super blueberry, it's never really hit me. And I think it's because it's probably a lot of, artificial flavors or sugars or whatever, but like blueberry sodas and things like that. But this blueberry mead, it's perfect because I don't get any tartness or bitterness on it. You just get that nice blueberry flavor with a really drinkable, of like slightly carbonated beverage. And again, super refreshing, just like the raspberry one. But I'm up here in Maine, and I guess Maine, the big thing is blueberry. Maine blueberry, see that everywhere. So this is probably one that I'm sure. Are you only available in New Hampshire right now, or could we find this stuff in other areas of New England as well?
Yeah, so we're in obviously New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island, and then some parts of New York as well, like the city and sort of just outside the city. You can find our stuff.
Haven't jumped over here to Maine yet. Soon?
We've tried. It's tough, I mean, it's a big state. It's a deceivingly big state.
It is.
Nick, you get this reaction a lot and you are always surprised.
I am always surprised because I just know, and I think part of it too is just the, I guess the craft beverage scene is so big here already that there's only so much room. But I don't know of any really good local meaderies. The only meadery I know up here in Maine is that Maine Mead Company or a Honeymaker or whatever it is. But I haven't really been a huge fan of the stuff that I've tried from them that's just on the supermarket shelves. But maybe I haven't tried enough of it. But I definitely, from some of the other ones that we've tried here, like them a lot better. And I could see myself drinking one of these, like the draft style meads, a lot more often than I will a traditional mead, just because you can grab it and drink it whenever you want. It's so easy and so refreshing. So I want to get these on the shelves. Luckily, I said I always drive through there, so I'm just gonna have to stock up on my way through Ossipee.
Yeah, you have an easy way.
This podcast is going to blow up and go viral, and then the demand is just going to overwhelm for us to get into Maine and
dozens of listeners.
All of our Maine friends listening.
Yeah, that's right.
For those who are listening, speaking of, I did want to mention, because I don't know if we said it before, these two, the jam session, the wrench turner, they are slightly sparkling. Is that correct? So they're like a bubbly, yes. Yeah. So for everyone listening, I just wanted to make sure that was clear because they are a little different than the flat meads that we'll be trying.
Right. And that's kind of what I was leaning towards when it comes to talking about certain beers that you get. It has that slight carbonation, but it's nothing like a seltzer that's going to be, super bubbly in your mouth. You're not really going to notice that. It's just enough to give it that sort of refreshing, light, almost airiness to it. But yeah, Bianca, do you want to take us into some of, now that you teased a little bit, these, I guess, flat meads? Is what we're calling them? Is that what they're called?
I don't know the official name if that type is, so I just made it up, but you can tell us because you're the expert.
Yeah, I mean, well, we're all like making it up as we go. That's what I said before. That's why we can all just make things up. I mean, so the way that I don't know if this is like official industry, consensus, but the way that we kind of refer to it is like meads that, like the ones, the Bramble, the One of These Days, those, we just call them traditional style. So, they're more wine-like, they're not carbonated, they're generally in like the wine strength, 12, 13, 14, 15%. And then, the ones in the cans, we either refer to them as session meads or draft meads, because, draft is really like, session, I think, is probably the like quote unquote right term, but draft mead just seems to be better at communicating to the consumer that like, oh no, this is like a lower alcohol carbonated, like I would get this on draft. It kind of sets the expectations for everybody. Whereas traditional meads, like, that's kind of more like what mead is, what people think mead is, I should say.
Yeah, I
Much
agree
better
with you there. I
description of
definitely think, and if you're not super into, I guess, the craft beer scene, you wouldn't really be too familiar with session ales and stuff, because it's not really, I don't think, common nomenclature for, the general public. But so I think draft really hits the nail on the head for what you're experiencing when you're drinking it. So Bianca, I'll let you start with the flat meads, the traditional meads here.
Yeah, I'm making up stuff as I go. It's fine. Okay, so I have Experiment 2004. Is that the official name of the raspberry hibiscus and rose hips?
That's the official number.
I love it. Experiment 2004. Okay, we're gonna try it. It's good. It's also very raspberry, which is nice. It's very similar to the sparkling, but not sparkling. So I feel like the flavors are still, because of the raspberry, it's very nice. So I did notice there was a pretty significant difference in the alcohol by volume when it comes from a bottle to a can. What is it that causes that? And is there a reason that like 2 cans have to be a certain percentage? Is that why you do it that way?
Yeah, there's kind of a couple of reasons. First of all, we're the can, the session, the draft, the sparkly, whatever you want to call them, that style mead being in a 4-pack in a can, people, when they're drinking that, they're going to want to, be doing stuff like out active, whatever, at the beach, hiking, mowing the lawn, yada, yada, like treating it similar to, a cider in a can or a seltzer or a beer. So it would be kind of dangerous and maybe a little sketchy to be thrown around 15% 4-packs of mead that went down quite that easy. So yeah, we wanted to make something that was a little bit lower alcohol, a little bit more, you can have a few kind of situation. And then also there are some like kind of dumb archaic laws that govern, things, and that's why 6.9% is where we're at, as opposed to 7 or 6.5 or whatever. So yeah, there's kind of a combination of just trying to make it fit the context of when the consumer is going to be drinking it, and then also fitting into just the lunacy that is our country and states liquor laws.
Now I'm curious about that with the 6.9, because I've definitely had beers that are above that before with an ABV. And is that just because maybe is it a 16-ounce can thing? Is something to do with that, or is it just something weird with beer compared to mead?
It's weird. So there is no such thing as like a meadery as far as like the US government's concerned. We're all licensed as either wineries, or there's probably a few licensed as breweries. And so we're licensed as a winery. And so they have all these kind of weird regulations around the size of the container that you can put things in. And if you make something below a certain alcohol level, you below 7%, essentially, you get out of that jurisdiction, and it opens things up a little bit. But the state of New Hampshire doesn't let you make any wine that's less than a certain amount. So we have this like very narrow window where we're low enough that we don't have to worry about the federal regulations, but we're high enough that we, don't have to worry about these like weird state regulations. So
that is a weird state regulation. You can't have anything below a certain amount. I mean, I
Yeah,
get the max value, but the minimum that's even weirder.
yeah. Well, that's New Hampshire.
Doing it big. So we'll try this one next. So I have another traditional mead here. Not all meads are created equal. Honey wine. Um, this one I love. Just to comment, I love these bottles, and I know I find that a lot with some of the different meaderies. There's always funky bottles that you guys experiment with. More so when you see with a lot of spirits, you see kind of different shaped bottles and stuff, but it's definitely all over the map when it comes to mead. Like comparing the two that I hear, I have this one and I have the other one. Try not to spill because I just realized I don't have a cork on this one. But the one of these days is short and stout, and the other one's super tall and skinny.
Or it's in a can.
Or it's in a can. So what goes into choosing before or while I taste this, I'll have you talk about this. Choosing the bottle. Is it just basically whatever you think will fit with what that is, or is it something to do with the flavor or presentation? Or tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar to the last question. Like, it's a little bit of both. It's a little bit of trying to pick a bottle that represents the style that's going into it. So with the one of these days being a barrel aged mead, it's got more of a spirit like characteristic. And so that bottle, that kind of short, stout, square shouldered bottle, is a little bit more reminiscent of a spirit. You might find like a whiskey or a gin or something like that in a bottle that looked like that. So we, by putting it in that bottle, it kind of helps to evoke those ideas in the consumer's mind. The tall skinny bottle, it's funny that you say that. It was a matter of necessity. We used to use a different style bottle that was clear and a little bit shorter than that, a little bit more just like a little mini Bordeaux bottle essentially. And they stopped making it. Just out of the blue one day, we got a phone call and they're like, yep, no more making that bottle. And we really liked it. We would dip the top in beeswax that we had colored based on the ingredients that were going in. And that was kind of the aesthetic. And then one day we couldn't do that anymore. So we had to kind of scramble and find a new bottle. And we have to use 375 milliliter bottles for what we do, and there aren't that many, and that was just one that kind of spoke to us. Didn't feel it felt like it had some class to it. It felt like it had a shelf presence, like being tall. It would have, you'd be able to kind of see it. It would stand out a little bit. I honestly, I would like to find a different style bottle, because what we didn't realize was that they are horrifically tippy. They will fall over if you look at them funny. And so putting them on a shelf at a store, it's a risky proposition. In fact, I just had to run up Saturday afternoon to a grocery store, because they had put our bottles on the top shelf of like a rack in the aisle, and it was just somebody had hit it with a cart and they had tipped and nothing had broken, but it was kind of that thing. So I ran up and with my drill and some like black iron pipe and like fabricated this rail thing around the top of the shelf to keep the bottles from tipping over. So it's just one of those things.
Yeah. And I also imagine some places where they're trying to fit a lot in there might be too tall for the shelf too. That's a tall bottle.
Yeah, 100%.
So to get into the tasting this one, so this is a traditional honey wine mead here, and what I'm tasting when I taste it, it's just liquid honey. That's liquid gold. That's very tasty, very sippable. There's no bad aftertastes or bitterness or anything, or any strong, I guess, alcohol taste on it. It's just, it really is like drinking liquid honey. It's really good. Yeah, I love this one.
Yeah, and I mean, this obviously isn't any surprise to you guys, but what I always appreciate about that, just a straight honey mead, is how representative of the honey that's going into it is. And that changes based on the season, based on the geography of the hives, and a bunch of different factors. It's I always kind of refer to it as, essentially like the terroir of the mead. Same idea, the weather and the climate and the soil affect the grapes, which affects the wine, and the same idea, the flowers that are blooming, when the bees are collecting the nectar, affects the honey, affects the mead. And that traditional mead, it's noticeable in all of the meads to some extent, but in the traditional, because it is just honey, it's really there. If we get our honey pretty much entirely from northern New England, and so, based on where it's coming from, that mead is going to change subtly. It's going to have, these kind of like sagey, herbal, clover notes. If it's coming from upstate Vermont, if it's down in like the Pioneer Valley, Connecticut River Valley in like Western Massachusetts, usually a later season honey, like it's a little bit more robust, a little bit more vegetal, I guess you could say. And that's always changing just based on what's, where the bees were going and where we were getting the honey from, which I think is one of the coolest parts of mead. We've got, a lot of different varietal honeys that we play around with and do barrel aging. We've got, we've got a honey. There's maybe like, I don't know, 2 gallons of this mead, but when we first started, we were buying honey from, basically this guy that lived in the middle of the woods nearby, and it was a little sketchy, but he was pretty nice and he had good honey. So one day I'm picking some stuff up, and he's got these 2 jars on his shelf, and they're like this really dark color. And I was like, George, what the hell are those? And he's like, that's honey from 1998. And I was like, why do you have honey kicking around from 1998? And he's like, well, we had that big ice storm that year. And he's like, it was like somebody took a rolling pin over the forest. And when the bees woke up in the spring, it was a late bloom on flowers. They didn't have enough forage. So they started collecting, instead of nectar from flowers, they were collecting sap from all the busted trees and broken branches and stuff. And they made essentially honey out of tree sap. And so that honey was a run out of that year. And I was like, oh my God, I tasted it. And it tasted, I don't know, it tasted like sweet bark, like it tasted like trees and acorns and stuff. Almost a little bit like maple syrup, but not quite. And so anyway, we bought that honey and we made a little batch, and we always said we were going to release this like ice storm honey mead for our like 20th anniversary. Actually, we used to say we'd do it for our 10th, but then we forgot. Our 10th anniversary was in February, so it's going to have to be the 20th now.
Now, is there any way to sort of control what the bees are, I guess, pollinating or using to produce that honey? I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. Is there any way to guys control the environment or control the area that the bees are in to say, I want this honey to taste like this? Or is it really just whatever the bees are going to do, the bees are going to do?
It's pretty much whatever the bees are going to do, they're going to do. They'll go for miles in any direction if they need to collect the nectar. And so, best thing, you see a lot of places will just move hives around to different farms, or different areas. That's one way of doing it. You're not really controlling what the bees go to, but you're controlling where the bees kind of start from. So if you want, real good blueberry blossom honey, you just plunk the hives down in, a giant blueberry field, and it's probably going to be primarily blueberry blossoms. But yeah, you can't put up a little mini poster on the inside of the hive with a map that says go here.
Yeah, this is what we want.
If only.
If only.
So is that your last mead, Nick? Or do you have another one?
I have one more. Do you not have another bottle with you that you cracked?
Well, I do. I have the Bramble, but I didn't know if you had done your other one yet. So
no, well, we were
Nick's tall,
off.
skinny bottle.
You go
here.
next. Yeah, I'll let you take the Bramble.
Okay. So I tasted this when we were just talking, and this one's really interesting because it reminds me more of like a wine than it does the other ones did. I think it's because the maple gives it more of a natural flavor. It's a little bit less, I shouldn't say a little bit, it's a lot less of that like tart fruity and a lot nicer, like a soft, really cool flavor with the blackberry and the maple together. Which blackberry I feel like is not a super fruity fruit anyway. It's a very good like subtle berry. So with the maple, it has a really interesting flavor and a really like a cool, I think just overall like palate texture. It's good. It reminds me so much of like a red wine, like a light red wine. The texture is a lot different, but flavor wise, I feel like that's kind of what stuck out to me. It's just from drinking and trying a lot of different wines. Like that was kind of what hit me with this one. And I could be way off, but I'd love to get your input on, what it is supposed to taste like and what your thoughts are behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty spot on description. The reason that we actually used to call it Blackberry Maple. We've been making that mead for a long time. We changed it to Bramble, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And part of the reason was because, the word bramble, like you said, blackberries aren't super fruity. Like if you eat a blackberry, like if you're eating like, blackberry ice cream, or black raspberry ice cream, which I think most people, like that's their association, like that's not really representative. Like you eat a blackberry and like, it's kind of fruity, but like, it's kind of like harsh. It's a little planty. Like it's got a lot of other things going on. So the word bramble, at least to me, really kind of helps to evoke the other qualities that you get when eating a blackberry, especially like if you get one that's not quite so ripe in the handful, there's got that kind of, green, earthy note going on. And so, yeah, like that when that ferments out, it has like this really like red wine characteristic, the tannins, kind of that like drying grippiness. And so by adding the maple syrup to it by back sweetening with the maple syrup, it kind of softens that out. It doesn't really like overwhelm those notes, but it just kind of gives them some context and like pulls a little bit more of that fruit flavor forward. So I think that was exactly what we were shooting for.
I don't think I could tell you what a blackberry tastes like. I don't know if I've ever had a blackberry or when the last time I had a blackberry was. I'm sitting here trying to think, have I had a blackberry? And I can't recall a single time that I have. So I'm not like I said, I'm not a big fruit guy, not a big berry guy. It's just not my cup of tea, I guess. But
just a big spice guy. That's it.
Yeah. There you go. We got to get a ghost pepper mead or something from you guys.
Oh man, I wish I knew that, man. We just bottled up a cherry and cassia pepper mead.
Oh, that's so Nick.
If I'd known that you were into if I'd known you were into hot stuff, I would have thrown that in there.
Well, you know what? Next time I'm coming through, I'll stop by and pick up a bottle because I definitely will be soon, and that is something I definitely want to try. But yeah, Bianca and I were talking about this the other day. I think there's a picture of it up on our Instagram now, but I recently got those Korean spicy noodle challenge noodles that have been going all around YouTube and TikTok and everything, and I've just been eating them like they're regular food. That's that's my bread and butter there. So we'll try this other one next because my other cup of tea, if you will, is bourbon and whiskey. That's my other favorite. So I have the one of these days here. So this is it's a bourbon barrel aged, looks like 2-year aged in bourbon barrel mead. So while I sip this, you want to tell us a little bit about the aging process there? I guess maybe selecting the barrels or what you kind of looked for in that, and what you were hoping to get on the effect on the mead.
Yeah. So I mean, barrel aging is definitely, I'd say, the most fun and interesting part of what we do. I feel like we never are doing enough of it. I always want more barrels. Essentially, our barrel program is matching varietal honeys with previously used spirit barrels. So, some of my recent favorites, we did a star thistle honey, which has kind of like almond, dark fruit notes to it, pairing that and putting it into, an old brandy barrel, and trying to, get those flavor combos working together. Doing coriander honey which has kind of a like a little bit of like a spice, a little bit of a spice note to it, putting that into an old red wine barrel, French red wine barrel. but this one is much more straightforward. It's just our like a local wildflower honey, fermented out, and then it's like you said, it's spent 2 years in an old Jim Beam bourbon barrel, and so with that, we're basically like, it's kind of just a crowd pleasing barrel aged mead. It's got this just wonderful oak characteristic. You've got obviously the bourbon. I mean, when we get the barrels in, they're fully saturated with whatever the spirit is. In some cases, there's still like a gallon or two of that spirit like sloshing around in the barrel itself. So, they're really getting the full effect of whatever we're aging it in. And so to me, that one is just like, end of a long day, you got a nice big comfy recliner, you pour yourself a couple fingers of that, and you just kind of like, let it all melt away. That's the move with that meal.
Definitely, I'm with you there. And yeah, so when tasting this, it's very fruity on the front. It's very fruity. I don't want to say that as in it's not citrusy or anything like that. It's like it's got a nice sweetness to it, but definitely has a lot of that bourbony whiskey characteristics to it, where I'm getting that oakiness. I'm getting almost like vanilla on it, and then some of those darker fruits that you might have in certain bourbons as well. It's got that sweetness, but yeah, definitely a lot of that flavor is coming through that I would expect to from the barrel. So definitely on top of the fruitiness of the actual mead itself, the honey that's going into it, it's super tasty. And I could definitely see myself ending a long day with this one for sure. And that's what we're doing today, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you have a lot of really interesting flavors. We've talked about quite a few of them already. But one of the ones that I had seen on your website earlier, and I was checking out everything else that you have, was the Chamomile Mint, which is experiment 2104. Is that actually minty? And what is honey, like that honey flavor in a mead and a mint mix like? And I can imagine the chamomile must have its own powerful flavor too. So is that like completely different than all of your fruit forward meads?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of those, we actually do a lot of more herbal infused styles. They end up being fairly dry. Things like chamomile, jasmine. We've done several different kinds of basil infusions, Thai basils and things like that. We've done anise hyssop, which is a kind of a licoricey flower. And that kind of style of mead is a really great counterpoint to doing all these big, heavy fruit guys, or the ones that are, more the barrel age, which are, delicious, but very intense in flavor and very heavy handed. So we always try to have a variety of stuff. And, we have the session style meads, which are, definitely fill the role of something that's like a little bit lighter and easier to drink. But, mead is just so versatile. You can make traditional style meads, that are 12%. They're not carbonated, very wine-like, but that are very light, that are fairly dry, have very subtle flavors like the chamomile and the mint. They're in there. They're not gonna like reach out and slap you. Like they're pretty mild. They're pretty subtle. The mint, I mean, I don't know what words to use to describe mints other than minty. It's there. It's not, it is pretty subtle. The chamomile is really interesting. We like playing around with chamomile. Chamomile, depending on the variety, actually can have, that really familiar like chamomile tea quality to it. It can also have kind of a more tropical fruit note to it, which is really interesting. In fact, there's one mead that we've made in the past. We use something called pineapple weed, which sounds kind of strange, but it's actually just it's a cousin to chamomile. It's wild chamomile essentially, and it's a weed. It grows everywhere. I would bet money that it's probably growing in your gravelly driveway right now, and it makes these little mini flowers that look like little mini pineapples, and you pick those, you crush them up, and it tastes like I like Malibu rum. And it's just this wild flavor that you can elicit out of something that grows very locally. Um, and so, yeah, chamomile kind of runs the gamut, and all of our different herbal infused meads. I mean, you can get all kinds of different flavors. That raspberry hibiscus rosehip is like, that's probably the extreme example because we put raspberries in there too, but rosehips and hibiscus make for a really interesting flavor. We've got a hibiscus mead coming out in a few weeks. That's got some dried apple, hibiscus, and gosh, there's one more thing in there I'm forgetting off the top of my head. But yeah, we love playing around with like kind of the herbal side of things.
You started with home brewing. So what is it that really inspired you when it came to the mead? Like, it obviously must have been a turning point that you started doing mead, and like what was it that like really was like the driving force behind that, other than there were too many breweries?
Yeah, I mean, so I'd never made mead homebrewing. I'd only done beer. It was Ash, my cousin, who had made a lot of mead. And you know, he'd bring it to like family stuff, family events or whatever. And you know, I remember like trying it, being like, why is he making mead? Like, what the hell is mead? What is the deal with this? And you know, like, I mean, when we started, the idea was we would do both mead and beer, and I was really excited to do beer. I think, you know, legally we ended up not being able to do both in the same facility. You know, just another those stupid laws resurfacing. But it's definitely for the best, and I'm glad that we did. What really kind of clicked for me with mead was a combination of what I said earlier about the honey, you know, being representative of essentially like the agriculture of an area, and being able to capture that, you know, what flowers were blooming when the bees were collecting the nectar, being able to capture that in a glass of a beverage, of a libation. That was really intriguing to me. And just then opening up to, wow, we can put pretty much anything in this. Like, there are no rules, there's no pre-existing structure, there's no styles real. I mean, there are, like, but you know, in terms of, there's no snobs out there yet. Like, there aren't mead purists out there yet that are like, no, you can't do it like that, you have to do it like this. And you know, we went out to the Mazer Cup. Are you guys familiar with that?
No.
The Mazer Cup, it's the biggest mead competition in the world. It's in non-COVID times, it's every March or April out in, like, just outside of Boulder, Colorado. And it's they do a commercial side and a home side. And so we started submitting meads to that, and then going out and participating in it back in, like, I feel like we went in 2012 was our first time. And going out to that, and you know, it's one thing when you're like just like a couple of, like, you know, country kids like in Ossipee, New Hampshire, sort of doing stuff in your own little bubble. But then going out there and realizing that, like, there are, you know, there was, you know, hundreds, literally, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of meads that have been submitted, but there's hundreds of people who are just extremely passionate about making mead and tasting it and drinking it and learning about it. And there were, like, you know, people that came from Europe, you know, whose families have been making mead for generations, in the way that, you know, people have been making, their winemaking families have been, you know, making wine for generations. And, you know, just getting a real sense for the breadth of what could be done. You know, we signed up to judge some of the homebrew sides of things, and you sit down with, you know, this, you know, whatever the category you're doing, it's, you know, fruit meads, or, you know, random, you know, other things that aren't in a category, you know, kind of like experimental stuff. And you just sit down and, like, you know, somebody has made, you've got, you know, a bacon mead, you've got a, you know, just like all these, like, whatever, like any combination of spices and herbs, coffee, you know, just absolutely anything. And that was just like, wow, like, you can really create anything. And both Ash and I, our backgrounds prior to opening the meadery was, you know, culinary. We were cooks and chefs in restaurants. And so, you know, the ability to take sort of the creative process of coming up with, recipes and culinary stuff, and having that so easily translate into alcohol. If you're making beer, you're really restricted. Well, now you're not, because now people are putting everything from Pop Tarts to, just whole fruit
Mustard. I think
purees
there
and
was a French's
mustard.
mustard beer last year.
Jesus, yeah, no kidding. But at least back then, it was like you're restricted to hops and different kinds of malts, and you've got kind of a narrow lane. But with mead, it was like, it was just the same as coming up with a sauce for a dish, or anything like that. You could just be like, I wonder what that and that would taste like combined together, and be able to do it in a way that was, kind of interesting, and that it would be sort of accepted, because there weren't those pre-existing rules and purists that would, wag their fingers at you.
And you've obviously had so many incredible experiences. So before we wrap, can you share your favorite part, or at least like one of your top favorite parts of working with Mead and, having this business and really getting to know all the people who are passionate about it like you are, and where we can find you so we can follow along with the rest of your journey on social media?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I've been incredibly fortunate to, the community of people in the mead world. Like you said, we're all kind of like reinventing the wheel, and kind of everybody's sort of like blazing their own path. But everybody's like extremely helpful. You ever have a question or whatever, you can call or email just about anybody in the industry, and they're like, oh yeah, I dealt with that problem last week. Here's what we're doing. So everybody's really great. My favorite aspect of it is, getting a chance to, work behind the bar at the meadery and see people who have either lived in Ossipee for, a long time, or they've been like, their families come up in like summer at the lake, for a long time, and hearing their, reactions and thoughts on, to see something happen in Ossipee, a town that, because that's the idea, is we're trying to, help to revitalize the town and give it a little bit of something to be proud of. And so anytime I get to hear somebody talk about that, how they remember, some old timers, like, I remember when there was a barber shop and a pharmacy around the corner, and, it's been empty for 50 years and this is so great. Like, that kind of stuff is, it never gets old. It's definitely my favorite part. And as far as where to find us, obviously all the socials, Facebook and Instagram is kind of where we primarily reside, and email, newsletter at Sap House Meadery is the tag, and saphousemeadery.com is the website.
And we'll include links in the description below for everyone to be able to find it easy. So yeah, thank you for coming on and spending the time with us tonight. We're so excited to try the mead. We had a lot of fun. We've been going for a while now. I know after this, I have been growing some fresh herbs myself, and I got some fresh mint. So I'm going to try making one of those mead heatos with the jam sesh. So that's, I guess, my next challenge for the night. But again, thank you so much for taking the time. I can't wait to come in, try some more. Cheers.
Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Be sure to follow us on social at Uncorked Corner and on the blog at uncorkedcorner.com for a taste of more food and beverage content.
And if you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave a comment, subscribe, rate, and review on whatever podcast platform you prefer. Thanks for listening.